friends, welcome to Cashing In on Content Marketing. I'm Amanda Milligan, the marketing director at Fractal. And every week on the show, I interview marketing experts about ways to know the value of your work and get buy-in for your strategies. This week, I am very pleased to welcome Chima Mmeje to the show. We're doing something a little different. This episode was actually live recorded on Clubhouse. I re-recorded this intro though because it didn't sound that great. So bear with some of the audio. I think we fixed a lot of it up, but this was live recorded on Clubhouse. And if you're interested in events like this, sign up for our newsletter on the podcast page because we'll send out alerts about special events that happen in ways that you can actually ask our guests questions. So Chima is joining us today to talk about the ROI of long-form content and how it can bolster your SEO strategy. Welcome to the show, Chima.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Amanda.
I'm very excited about this. This was all her idea, so hopefully you all get some value out of this. I think it's really cool. So just to start off, I talk nonstop about intent being what you should use to determine the type of content you're creating. So when you're doing your keyword research, how do you start to get the sense that long form is going to be the way to go?
Okay, so the first thing I do when I'm trying to get an idea of if this is going to be a long form content or not, first of all, I used to do it manually, but now I use tools like Phrase, put in the keyword there, and then Phrase aggregates data based on the top 15, I think, 15 to 18 content pieces that are ranking. And then they tell me, okay, this first piece of content has 1.5, the second piece has 2.5, this third piece has. So I can look at all of that data and have an idea of, okay, these guys are all creating long form content that are above 2,000 words. And if I'm trying to beat them out on quality and length, then I have to go longer. So that is usually how I determine how long the content has to be.
And aside from just having content that's more comprehensive, which I assume is what you kind of get with long form content, are there any other benefits to going sort of the long form route?
Yeah, I think I did a post on this on LinkedIn about the benefits of creating long form content. And it allows you to build authority. Like, yeah, you can create 1,000-word blog post or a 500-word blog post, but how do you really go deeper and show more value in such a short amount of time? So long form allows you to really go deep, show your expertise on the topic, explain not just the key concept, but related questions that people might be asking around that question, so that by the time they finish reading the article, they're feeling like, okay, this person really knows what they're talking about. Long form content is also great for acquiring backlinks naturally. I can't tell you how many people, I just wake up sometimes and I see that someone has linked to a piece of content I wrote on my blog or a guest post, and it's always awesome, but mostly it's because it's long form content and they found it very educational, very informative. Apart from blog posts and authority, I feel like when I'm asking for backlinks, which I rarely do, but when I'm trying to get someone to link to me, it's easier when the post is in-depth. In-depth mostly happens in terms of long form. Long form also helps you generate more leads. I think there was a study on this. I would have to check LinkedIn, because I know there was a study on this, and it showed that long form helps you generate more leads than shorter form content. And this happens because people perceive you as the authority, people perceive you as someone who is giving information. If you come with a viewpoint of, I want to educate, I want to be helpful, you're more likely to get people to drop money than if you are coming with them with a buy mindset. So it helps you generate leads, it helps you become an authority, it helps you to earn more backlinks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How long does it usually take you to create a piece of content of this length and do all of the required research for it?
Okay, it depends. Like if it's a keyword that has a pre-existing search volume, I can just go straight to Google, check the keyword, plug that into Phrase, start to look at search intent behind that keyword. Once I understand the search intent, kind of like use phrase. There's this cool thing that phrase also does again, where they kind of show you all the H2s, H3s, all of the subheadings for every article. So rather than opening each one manually, I can just quickly read through each of them to have an idea of what it's talking about, the kind of subheadings I should be looking at. So right now, all that process of doing the research for the content takes maybe 2-3 hours. And then the writing depends on how long and how much of a subject matter expert I am. If I'm writing SaaS content for CRM tools, I can finish that up in 2 days. If I'm writing something around marketing SEO, this is my field, I can do that in 2 days. If I'm writing more technical content pieces for people like Sensu, that usually takes like 4 to 5 days because I have to fact check every single line, and it just takes me longer because this is not really like my field of expertise. So at the most, and I'm talking like maybe a 4K blog post, 1 week max, but usually 2 to 3 days.
That's really interesting. I think sometimes when it ends up taking a while, it's harder for people to get the buy-in to create something like that, because some people have the expectation, and it's not a correct expectation, that you can write a blog post in a couple hours, right? So some people, especially people who work internally, might have trouble getting the buy-in to do something like that. So how do you use metrics to kind of show those things you mentioned earlier, the value that long-form content can bring? Like, what do you use to show that value?
Okay, this is interesting because I usually don't have to show the value of long form content. Most of my clients, not most, I think right now, all my clients are content marketers and people who work in SEO, which means that they already have a high awareness of the need for long form content. They are coming to me with problems that they already know. That, okay, this is a keyword we're trying to rank for. We're not doing well for this keyword. We understand that we need long form content to rank for this keyword. So there's never been a need for me to explain to someone why they need long form content. I think that only happened once. And what I did was that I took a screenshot of the first document showing how most of the other websites that are ranking for that keyword right now, we're creating 800, 1,000 pieces. And I told the client that if we created something longer that allowed us to answer more questions that people were asking as it related to that keyword, and then we built backlinks with the kind of DA that the client already had, we had a better chance of ranking for that keyword. And that's actually what happened. I can just show them all of the previous pieces I've created that are long form content, show them what the other competitors were creating that were shorter, and then how it's always easier to rank with long form content than if we're creating shorter pieces of content. But that rarely ever happens, since most of my clients are content marketers and SEO folks.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think a lot of the time when people get pushback, it's when they're internally trying to get buy-in from either other teams or their boss who aren't SEO specific. I'm glad that that's not the situation that you run into. I'd like to back up a bit and talk about your keyword research strategy. I feel like everybody kind of comes at it a different way, so I'd love to hear what your process is, especially if a client comes to you and they really have no idea where to begin. What do you do for them, or what do you advise them on how to just get started?
Okay, usually when a client comes to me and they're not sure where to start, I always advise them to go for quick wins. So I use SEMrush. I'm looking at which of their content pieces are on page 2 that is not doing well right now that we can optimize and take them to page 1. Usually it's content that has that is very thin, that there is no keyword there's no keyword on that page, there's no search intent, nothing. So we can just rewrite that piece of content for a keyword that I feel like this is what we should be ranking for based on what the content is talking about. And then we write that piece of content and watch what happens. Most times it ranks because it's already on page 2. So we just need to optimize it to get it to page 1, maybe build a few backlinks. If the client is coming with like they're just starting a fresh blog, the first thing we're going to do, I always tell them to build topic clusters. And I always want my clients to be the one to tell me what keywords they want to rank for. Like, not necessarily keywords, but topics. What topic do you want to be the authority on? If you could think of one thing that best described what you did, what would that word be? So we can go from there. Sometimes clients think that they have a disruptive product. That rarely ever is the case, because I always tell them, no matter how disruptive you think your product is or your service is, somebody else is doing something similar. Now, what word are people using when they are thinking of that service? That is where we're going to start from, and then build out to create authority for you in terms of the keyword that you think you should be ranking for. So that process starts with SEM Rush. Quick wins for those who already have an existing blog. And then for those who are just starting out, building topic clusters for the main keywords or topics that they want to be authorities on.
Yeah, I love that it starts with a conversation with your client about what they want to be authorities in and trying to get them to suss out what makes them different from other brands that are in their industry, because then at least you have a starting point of, even if you're not ranking for these things, now you have a sense of what they want to rank for, and then you can start doing the research from there. I can't remember where I saw it. It may have been a blog post you wrote or something on your site, but you had mentioned the importance of including emotion in long form content. And I'd love to hear more about that, because I know that for a lot of long form content, it's very in depth. It's sometimes very technical or very how-to oriented. So how do you go about incorporating emotions in content like this?
Number one, I think people are afraid to be human, which sounds weird. You're talking to human beings. I'm always looking for a way to break the ice when I start writing a piece of content. Like, if you notice on LinkedIn, I'm always talking about facts. I always find a way to insert fact jokes in my post, like on my blog, everywhere. I'm always cracking jokes. Like, you have to think of the audience. What kind of words are they using to talk? Reddit is always a good place for that information. What kind of jokes are they cracking? What kind of slangs are they using? Like, people are so stiff. Like, remove that tie from your neck and just let go. If you're trying to evoke emotion, you have to speak their language. Starting from the introduction pain point, I want to hit hard, as deep as possible, to that problem that is making them to search for that keyword. So, like, if I was writing, for instance, yesterday I gave a talk on SEO Mastery Summit, and I have an example of mountain bikes. Now, if I was writing a blog post on that, I would attack one of the reasons why people go mountain biking. It's going to be hard. It's always tricky. Sometimes it's to lose weight, okay? Having problem losing weight. What are the issues regarding that? You go deep to that emotion. Okay, they're trying to build community because they are lonely, or they just want to feel like they belong. Attack that in that introduction. I know it's hard to hear this, but I feel like negative emotions always do well to hook people and to keep them on the page. It's not necessarily a bad thing if you satisfy the intent behind that question, and then turn that into a positive by giving them the benefits later on in the copy. Then I like to use GIFs. GIFs are very, very funny. GIFs make it easy to understand the text. GIFs just breaks up all of those one block of text, makes it just fun to read. I like to crack jokes. I like to draw back on emotions. I like to go back on stories that happened to me in my own personal life, and then tie it in to that topic that I'm talking about. Basically, just be human. That's always the first point. Be human. Look at the emotion that the person was feeling when they were searching for that keyword. What is the driving reason behind them looking for that keyword or topic? Attack that in the introduction, go from there, then turn it into a positive as you keep writing, break it up, crack jokes, tell story. Don't just write with that, like you said, that's how-to mindset of just trying to be the person who is telling them what they need to do. Look at it from the point of the problem, the real pain points that brought them to the page, and then go from there.
I love that answer. It sounds like you're providing a lot of different ways to differentiate your content from what's already ranking. Like you said, being more human, bringing your personality into it, having empathy for the people reading and understanding why they're even searching for this or want this content, in addition to just having longer content that gets more into the issue. Are there any other aspects that you look at, especially when you're doing these quick wins, to try to get the piece of content on page one? Are there other, if you're stuck, if you have this piece of content you think is great and it's still not ranking, you mentioned links. Is that one of the key things you look at? Is there anything else that you look at as well?
Yeah, for sure. Links. I think today, tomorrow, next year, links will always be important. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I've had a piece of content that was on page 3, and then I built a few high quality backlinks to that page, and it jumped to page 1. And when it jumps to page 1, it's also earning links, it's earning leads, it's just doing amazingly well. So links for sure. When I say content is not ranking, then I go back again to that research that I did. Sometimes it's because I haven't answered the right questions. Hard to admit, but sometimes I haven't answered the right questions. I've answered the questions that I've seen on my competitors' pages, but I've not answered the real intent why people were searching for that keyword. And sometimes that just requires you to think more deeply. Okay? Sometimes it's me listing more topics or more semantic words related to the overhead keyword. I swear that really works. Like, software SEO is the best tool for this, getting those semantic words that are related to the main keyword. They're also really good for finding the right subheadings to use when writing content pieces. So if I can include as many relevant semantic words as possible in that piece, build a few more backlinks, make sure that I am answering the right questions in that content piece, I don't see why it should not rank, except if I'm coming up pages like HubSpot and the rest that have like crazy high DAs of like 70, 80, 90, and my client has a DA of like 20, 25, 30, then okay, yeah.
Right, that's definitely tougher. How do you go about, are you participating in the link building process? Like, do you advise clients on that, or do you leave that up to them?
Oh no, I don't do link building for clients. That's like a whole ball game entirely. I'm always trying to just do one thing and stick to it, because I'm the laziest human being you can think of on this mother earth. Laziest person, and I wholeheartedly own that, and I wear it proudly on my chest. So I just write long form content, but from the first conversation, I am open and I am honest with them, especially if they have a low domain authority, and I'm telling them, you're going to need to build links, you're going to need to think of content distribution, because that shit is very important. You don't just write content pieces, you also have to have a strategy for distributing that content to get it in front of the right people who would ideally like your content and like your offer. So that's something you always have to be thinking about, building links to the right places where your audience hang out, distributing your content. The more you can distribute that content, that's also going to earn you backlinks. So you have that link building strategy down to a T. You have that content distribution strategy down to a T. Honestly, you're already there.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people believe they can just create a piece of content and it will rank magically. And we know that's not the case, and that promotional aspect is extremely important. Let me ask you this. What are the biggest mistakes you think people make when creating long form content? So when you're looking at what already exists out there, what are you identifying as that is not correct? That is not what you're supposed to do.
Okay, the first thing I see a lot of is that the writing is stiff, like crazy stiff. Always looks like if a robot wrote it, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, this stuff is written for human beings. I don't even care if it's tech content. I don't even care who the audience is. Your content should be readable. And then you have all of these pieces of content where one sentence is like 3-4 lines, and it's just this long drabble, and I'm like, what? Who is going to read this nonsense? And then there are some blogs where the content is, the font is so tiny and it's like white. So you really have to squint your eyes and draw close to the computer just to see anything. And it's even worse on mobile, because people are not thinking of the fact that if it's 3 lines on PC, then it's probably going to be longer on mobile, since it's kind of like a smaller space. Okay, what else am I saying? Formatting. People tend to, this is like a no-brainer if you hire an SEO writer, but when you are tossed to like the cheapest writer, the formatting always looks like terrible. You have H2 here, you have H4 here, you have H6 on top, you have H3 here. Like, it's just all wrong everywhere. And then on page optimization, I think sometimes people just take that blog content that the writer has written and upload it to their website and boom, send it away. They don't even think about the fact that I have to do on-page optimization for this content, and it shows. Like, when I'm reading content pieces, I'm reading it like someone who writes for SEO and for humans. So I'm looking for those semantic words that Googlebot will also be crawling for when I'm reading that content. And I can always tell when I'm seeing them because I know what those semantic words, I have an idea of what the semantic words should be. So a lot of people are writing and it's fun, but without those semantic words, then there's no relationship to the overhead term, and it's harder for Google to give you that page one ranking, because if they can't see the relationship, then there's a disconnect. So you have to satisfy that Google side with semantic words, and you have to satisfy that user side with content that flows, content that is easy to read, mixed length, some sentences long, some sentences short, 3 lines for each paragraph. I don't even want 6 lines. I think it's too long because it's just going to be like a large block of text on mobile. Break that text up with images. Like, I don't want to be seeing 1,000 words and no pictures or graphics in there. Bullet points, turn them into like graphics. Some of this information that are like statistics would be really great for infographics, because you can share that stuff to other websites that have mentioned that specific statistic. It's also a great way to earn backlinks when you think of it. So these are some of the mistakes I'm seeing. People just invest in the writing and that's it. They're not thinking about all of the other parts that makes for good content. Adding graphics in there, on-page optimization, doing the actual research for those semantic words that make that tying that relationship, breaking up your text, actually looking at your page on mobile to see how that blog appears, because most times when you have those block of text that look okay on website, then on mobile is different. And I'm hearing that Google is moving to a mobile first only indexing soon. So this stuff is becoming increasingly important. So these are the mistakes that I see in long form content.
I am so glad I asked that question. You just gave an incredible checklist for anybody to use on what to make sure that they have in long form content. So thank you for that. We're already nearing the end of the half hour. So I wanted to ask you a question I've been asking every guest we've had so far in 2021. It's a little bit of a selfish question because I directly want to know everyone's answers. And it's basically, how have you been able to stay creative? It's something that I've struggled with since COVID especially, and kind of the monotony of being stuck at home. How have you managed to brainstorm or come up with ideas that are more creative than usual?
Honestly, I don't think I stay creative. I think I'm only motivated by money these days. Honestly, money motivates me. I haven't written anything on my blog since October last year. Like, even before then, I struggled the whole of last year to even create content for my blog. I'm struggling to write anything. I've stopped offering website copy service because I can't even get my brain to be that creative to write website content. So I'm limiting myself to just blog posts right now. So honest answer, money.
I love honest answers. I appreciate it. I ask this because sincerely, it is tough. Like, the creative side of things, at least for me, I don't know how anybody else feels. I'd love to hear from anybody if they have suggestions on this. But it is really tough because I at least feel tired all the time nowadays. So like you said, if you don't feel this passion to do something, I've been doing the same thing. I've just been like, I'm not going to prioritize that right now. I'll come back to that later and I'll do what's actually working for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I always beat myself up when I'm not being creative. I'm like, oh, people have been reading the same thing on a blog for 6 months now. Give them something new. And then I sit in front of my computer and then I turn it off and I watch RuPaul's Drag Race and the day is over. Story of my life.
Yeah, I totally get it. So, Chima, knowing the goal of the podcast, which is to help people understand the value of their content marketing work and get buy-in for it, who would you recommend to be a guest on a future episode?
I think Diana Mayfield, she's really good with anything that involves cold pitching, which I think it's something that most marketers really suck at, but Diana has figured it out. So for sure, get her in to talk about generating leads through cold pitching, cold emails, and all of that.
Thank you so much for those recommendations, Chima, and for taking the time not only to come on the show, but to experiment with this live on Clubhouse version of the show. I so appreciate you taking the time to share your insights with all of us.
For sure. Thanks for inviting me, Amanda. This was really fun.
If you've listened to this and want even more tips, sign up for our podcast newsletter by going to the podcast page on the Fractal website. And if you've learned anything from this show, we'd love it if you'd subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review. Finally, if you have feedback, suggestions, ideas, recommendations on who to follow on Clubhouse, or anything you'd like to share with me, shoot me an email at amanda@frac.tl. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you to Sean Kelly for podcast music and editing, and to Joao Pereira for logo design. And thank you, dear listener. I hope you'll join us next time.